Since the recording of this podcast episode, there has been a suspension on CMMC 2 Phase II by the Department of War. This is suspending the need for third-party certification, but not your obligation to protect CUI and maintain strong cybersecurity. Welcome back to 2W Conversations, where eavesdropping on experts isn't just okay, but encouraged. Last week, we hosted a webinar on CMMC 2, what it means and how to get prepared. Today, we're continuing that conversation, but this time we're sharing a success story. While the client will remain anonymous, the story is real. A manufacturer that had to understand what CMMC meant for their business, prepare their people and systems, work through the assessment process, and ultimately pass the audit. So with me today to share the story is Brad Cheney. He's our modern work practice manager who basically ran this whole thing. So Brad, thank you for joining us today.
Good afternoon, Danielle. How's it going?
Good. So the story we're sharing is actually extra special because it was the first CMMC 2 certification process we've done start to finish. So I'm going to try to bring you back to the beginning of this whole process. When you first met with their team, what concerns or questions were they bringing to the table right off the bat?
The great part of that particular client was they actually had a very energetic and knowledgeable team, both from like an infrastructure sense, a networking sense. Not only were we bringing our expertise, both from a security and compliancy standpoint, but they also had an internal team that was ready to, chomp at the bit to get ready on this. So they were interested in learning our standpoint in regards of putting this all together, both from like an Epicor standpoint and from a Microsoft standpoint, which was great.
Yeah.
And then putting it all together with their team for CMMC 2.0. So
cool. Yeah. It seems like we picked a good story. So
yes.
That's good. Do you think overall they felt prepared coming into this process, or were they still trying to figure out what CMMC actually meant for them?
I think at the very beginning, nobody knew from their team. Everybody figured out kind of what they were expecting.
Yeah.
That particular client had so many different business units. Not only did they have just one manufacturer, there were multi-manufacturers in that particular area. So there were many different areas that needed to comply.
And now, so like everything in our solution set, we always start with the discovery process. So what was the first thing that you needed to understand when they said that they were ready to become CMMC compliant?
Well, I think the most interesting thing was actually going back and figuring out, hey, we're moving everything into the GCC high tenant.
Okay.
People need to figure out that, hey, everything is no longer on a commercial tenant. So it changes your perspective on what's actually hosted out there, how we're going to make things work. And the good news was we had a lot of participation both from the client and from us, going down a litany of checklists. And for people that are listening, checklists are a very good thing out there, especially within CMMC 2.0, both from doing your NIST compliance, setting up your new network, from setting up all your licensing, doing all that kind of stuff. You're going to get really used to a lot of checklists, trust me.
So how did you actually determine where the company stood from a compliance standard at that point? Like, is there certain ones you look for, like that are stepping stones towards CMMC 2?
So one of the things that was very interesting about this particular client was they were very organized. That paid dividends off for this particular client because they were able to go back and they had a lot of run books.
Okay.
And they had a lot of time before this particular process to put a lot of their stuff onto paper. So that really helped them figure out exactly how to take what they currently had. I like to say paper, but it was within, like whether they were in Excel files or Word files and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And make it their own when it came to CMMC 2.0. And what I mean by that is if you look at like the 110 things within NIST, you can take a lot of your SOPs. You're going to be creating your SSP. There's a lot of stuff that you have to create for CMMC 2.0. But when you do it, if you have a lot of your initial documentation around your network or around how your business is run, it's going to pay dividends when you create that stuff for your first time in CMMC 2.0.
Okay. Yeah, because documentation's the biggest difference, right? Because
yes,
before it was, I promise we're compliant. Now it's like, okay, show us the proof.
You have to, that is the biggest thing with an auditor, Danielle, is show me.
Yeah. And just to be clear, we are here to set you up for success for the audit. We don't do the audit ourselves.
That's correct.
Okay, so aside from documentation, because I'm sure that's a big gap, what are some of the other common gaps that you expect to find during the discovery process?
Oh, discoveries are fun. We went out there and looked at a lot of their manufacturing floors for one of their business units. And it really hit me when we were out there looking at that. It's like, there's so much stuff that you need to do with those particular areas to make sure that you're compliant.
Yeah.
And it really hits you like, hey, we really have to sit down and make sure that not only are your devices on a laser cutter is correct, but once again, that, your user that logs into that device that goes through and updates your quantity in an Excel document is correct as well. Mm-hmm. And it's so interesting when you're actually out there looking on a floor or within an admin section or something like that, making sure that your stuff is not on your desk or on a plotter printer or anything like that. It's just changing the way that you're doing things. But it's fun going out and seeing these types of things, figuring out our gaps, putting them on our POAMs, and then knocking them off one by one. And once you have all those POAMs knocked off, you're going to pass your audit.
So one of the keywords that kept coming up in the webinar was CUI, Controlled Unclassified Information.
There you go.
So when you started having this conversation with this client, were they aware of that term? Did they know what fell under that umbrella? People
are always like, what is CUI data? And one of the things that we talk about is you could have an email that comes in, and could it be CUI data? It absolutely could be CUI data, right? But if you're in GCC High, those emails are safe, right? You're not in a commercial instance, which is great. Or once again, if you're on a manufacturing floor, and let's just say you have a pallet that comes in, the documents that are on that pallet, it could be marked CUI data. So there are different ways of looking at CUI data across your entire manufacturing instance. So whether it's digital, whether it's physical, whether it's a CAD drawing that you've printed out to put on the manufacturing floor, and then how to dispose of that CUI data as well. It's one of those things that you had to think through in regards of how things move through those systems. Thinking about workflow, your email, your items, all that kind of stuff throughout your entire system within your manufacturing floor goes through. And thinking about how stuff that may come from an order from, let's just say, maybe like a Boeing or something like that comes in, is something that you really have to think about now.
Okay, so now moving into the actual building the plan, building out what you went through. So once you understood where they were, how'd you start that? How'd you start mapping the path forward?
So, I mean, there's so much that goes into it. From the modern work compliancy and security perspective, is for us, we really had to go into it looking at what did we need to build from the infrastructure perspective and from the Microsoft 365 perspective. Okay. So it wasn't necessarily even worrying about, let's just say, the SSP, the documents per se, the policies per se. But one of the hardest things to really look at when you're doing this is figuring out, okay, we're going to move all these users into a GCC High environment, right? So everybody's going to be over in the sovereign cloud, in the government cloud. That's a big movement. One of the things that you have to think about is all this thing has to be tracked that you're moving in there. Everything has to be auditable. So we're moving the client over. We're putting everybody into a GCC High license. But here's where the kicker gets. We have to worry about everybody that's on the network, on the new network. We have to deploy out some type of a SIEM or SOAR, which means that we're tracking everything that's coming over the firewall, everything that's going in and out of M365, anything that's going in and out over the network, anything that's within the firewall. You name it, we're tracking everything in and out of the network that has to be there. Because that's what the auditors are going to be looking for. Anything that's out there to deploy, we're deploying everything. And we have a list internally of all the different systems that we deploy for Microsoft 365. Then, if the client, in this case, this client they have other things they want to deploy on top of the Microsoft stack that we have out there for logging purposes or anything, we'll deploy that as well. In this case, there are some other third parties.
So you're saying not necessarily in the CMMC 2 scope, but things that they're like, if we're doing this, we might as well tack on for their own personal benefit.
Well, maybe. Well, let's just say that if this client had another owner as well, maybe they at a parent level they have some other software as well.
Yeah.
So it's like it's very easy to not misconstrue it, but to say, hey, there are other things that are controlled by what we deploy out to that particular client, but there's also other software that needs to go in and monitor as well that kind of go together from a parent company or something like that. It can be a bit more difficult if you're by yourself or, with another conglomeration or something like that. And it just depends on how it's going, is how we monitor and utilize within a particular client or a particular user when it comes to CMMC 2.0. So it can be a bit hairy when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, for CMMC 2.0, you're making sure that all those lists that we talked about earlier, you're checking those boxes off as we're going down, Danielle. And so at the end of the day, once you get to the last box that's checked off, and from an infrastructure and from a networking perspective, you're done. So then we go over to the CMMC portion of it, right? And that's where you start working with some of the policies and stuff like that.
Okay. So how much would you say this process is technology versus people, process, and documentation?
That is such a great question. I think it's almost 50-50.
Okay.
And why I like to say it's almost 50-50 is because there's a lot of technological stuff that you guys have to do to get a client up to speed with CMMC 2.0. But it's really up to the client to know their own business, to know their own network.
Right.
When they go into an audit, I always like to say when they go into an audit, it's not us, 2W, answering those questions. We want to make sure that everybody is prepped as they can so they understand to be able to answer those questions of stuff that's there, right?
Yeah. Is there usually one point of contact to relay that on their side, or is it typically like depending on the department?
For this particular client, they had a really great team. Most of our meetings we had most of their team on the meeting, so a lot of knowledge transfer was done at those meetings. So I mean, we had a very intelligent team that just sopped up that information that we had. Yeah. So I mean, probably anyone on that team could have answered any of those questions, and we were very lucky in regards of what we had on that team.
Do you think that benefit was worth it to them? Like, do you think
it
made it easier for them?
Absolutely. But I think that particular client needed it. Because the fact of the matter is they were a larger client, right? So they had a lot of business units and stuff like that. But I mean, as far as a smaller client, if they are a smaller client, we do a great job of communicating in kind of our weekly stand-ups and everything like that. We do a great job of communicating to our client base in regards of, hey, this is what CMMC is. This is what we're doing in your environment. And this is what you need to do. Educate yourself in regards to like SOPs, SSPs, all this kind of stuff that's coming up. Yeah. So I think that's one thing that we do well.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I believe that for sure. So you mentioned in the beginning that there was one point where they came in and they didn't realize the scope. There was one point where they had that light bulb moment where they're like, okay, this is actually how much work this is going to take. What triggered that?
Realized that there was an Epicor piece to this. There was knowing that you're going to have to put a lot of documentation piece. I think there was just all this stuff had to be done. I think really, and there was a push from them that it needed to get done fairly quick. So, and I will say for that particular client, they did a tremendous amount of work on their side as well to make it happen. They became a great partner with us, but they also had a great executive buy-in as well. They were ready to go. They wanted to make this happen because they had business that needed to happen. There's a lot of people getting educated on compliancy over the last 3 months, especially, it seems. as people learn about this, and everything is like CMMC 2.0. What is CMMC 2.0?
Mm-hmm.
I always like to say it is not a sprint. It's a journey. And you need to have somebody on that journey with you that can help guide you on that journey, right?
Yep.
We've got a lot of people here that can guide you on that journey. We've got some people here that understand a lot of the compliancy, a lot of the security, a lot of the intricacies that come with all this kind of stuff. If we want to talk about DFARS, we want to talk about all the fun intricacies of NIST standards, we can do that. Well, it's like stereo instructions. It'll probably put you to sleep, but we can go there. So you know what I mean, Danielle.
Awesome. Yeah, now we have this story to prove it.
Exactly.
So now moving into the actual preparing for the audit, that process. So as the audit date got closer, assuming that, do you have to set a date for an audit like pretty far in advance?
There's a couple ways of doing it, right? A lot of places do they call it a mock audit.
Okay.
Which means usually somewhere between 30, 60 days, maybe even 90 days before your actual audit. And you do have to schedule your audit out quite a bit. It takes a little while to actually get an auditor to schedule up. But what I do recommend is scheduling a mock audit. They'll come, they'll take a look at everything that you'll go through and basically give you a report back and see how well you've done on your audit. And then actual audit. So they'll come on board, they'll start basically just going through all the controls, asking you tremendous amounts of questions. So if you guys like questions like Jeopardy, you're going to be great. And then, basically go through your entire CMMC 2.0 audit, which is basically going through all of your NIST controls. And then once that's done, you'll be given, best way I can tell you guys, it's a rating based off of all your NIST controls, whether you passed or failed all the different sections. And then you'll go from there. And if you pass, that's great. If you failed, you'll get a gap analysis. And usually you can POAM that out and have a remediation after that and talk to your auditor and go from there. So a lot of people don't necessarily pass on their first time. I will tell you. I will tell you. I can see where I can see where Danielle, I can see where you're going. The thing that it does or will do for you is increase your security and compliancy posture every time that you do it.
Yeah.
So you're only going to get better. Usually, if you do the mock audit and you do everything that it tells you to do, you're probably going to do well on your audit.
Right.
The only thing that it really doesn't do is stuff that's actually on your manufacturing floor and stuff like that with the auditors there. So there's some business processes that we're all going to have to talk about and stuff like that. But
okay,
that's us.
So how was the moment when you and the team that we're talking about got the successful pass?
Oh, it was great. I mean, one of the things was, look, I can't be like super happy exactly like how probably the client was. Like,
yeah. You have to do it again.
Yeah, I have to do it again. But what I can tell for the client was I was proud.
Yeah, good.
More than anything for me, I was proud because I know the amount of work that they put into getting that certification. Right? They worked hard.
Yeah,
they worked real hard.
So what does it look like in terms of like re-upping the certification? Is that like a regular cadence or?
I think at some point the client is going to go take a vacation to Tahiti before they have to re-up. You have to live CMMC 2.0, right? You can't just say, I passed the audit and we're done.
Right.
You just can't do that, everybody. You just can't do that.
Good reminder.
Once you pass the audit, you really have to follow the business processes and the IT stuff that you've put together. You still have to live that. So if you continue to live the processes and the business processes and the stuff that you've put together, the stuff that everybody that talked last week on the webinar, all that kind of stuff, if you live that stuff, you're going to be okay. Because when the renewal comes, you're just going to be like, oh, okay.
Right.
We're still living this stuff. We're good.
Yeah, that's the framework that you already did. Yeah.
They may make a few little changes to CMMC in the next 2 years or something like that, and you may have to make a little change here or there in an SSP or something. That's great. We may update your routers or something like that, or a firewall. That may make a change in something, but for the most part, if you live it, you really won't have to change that much, which is great.
Are there any misconceptions you want to squash that you've heard?
It's as only as hard as you make it. I think, for us who are kind of live it day in and day out, it's not an easy journey. It's not.
Yeah.
But if you sit down, you make a plan, you do your discovery, you make that out of that plan, you understand your business, which a lot of our manufacturers and customers and clients, they understand their business.
Yeah.
It's just making the investment.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably the one thing is just figuring that out. Because there's I see so many emails like being sent to me. What about this? I saw this in an email.
Yeah.
Like, just relax. Let's talk about it.
So if someone's listening today and they're like, oh crap, I have to start this process, what's the first step they should take?
Find a reliable partner that knows what they're doing. Find a reliable partner that can guide you on the journey, because you need someone that can kind of sit back and get you on the right path. Cool.
Okay, well, that about wraps it up.
Great.
Please go listen to the webinar. It's about an hour long, or 45 minutes long, but that does include a pretty lengthy Q&A. So the actual content's closer to only 25 minutes. So that with this are great resources to get started, as well as we did include in the webinar description a CMMC doc for dummies, kind of breaks down everything, simplifies it even further. So take a look at that. Otherwise, Brad, thank you very much.
Hey,
and
thanks,
congratulations again.
Yeah, thanks.